Well, hello there. First time at Seven City Church. I'm so thrilled to be here. My name is Sheila Harper, and I'm the founder and president of Save One, what Pastor Stephen was talking about just a few minutes ago. And I know it's not normal, and it's not every day that you come to church, and I know you're not thinking like, man, I hope we can get a really good sermon on abortion today. You know, it's not like we haven't heard enough about it in the past few weeks, but I am here to tell you we have a compassionate response to this issue. We're helping the men, women, and families after abortion, and sometimes we get the question, well, why are you helping those people afterward? Isn't it too late for them? Aren't we trying to stop abortion on the front end? And yes, we are, but we at Save One see that this is the missing link. This is the part that we have not addressed, those who made this choice. Just during the tenure of Roe, we had 65 million abortions that happened just in our country. That's 65 million women, 65 million men who lost fatherhood. There's 2 sets of grandparents attached to each one of those children. And so what we do is we resource the local church because the local church is where the power is. We can't keep thinking politics is going to do something for us. It's the local church. Now, we can't opt out of the political process, don't get me wrong, but the real power is right here in the local church. This is where you find community. This is where you find heart transformation, because as happy as we were that laws changed, we all know that laws can be changed back. So we're not looking just for behavior modification because a law was changed. We're looking for heart change. And what we do at Save One is we have Bible studies for men, women, and families. One of the reasons why I am so passionate about this subject is because I was one of those 65 million. At 19 years old, I got pregnant. I was in college. I went to my best friend, told her. She said, oh, just have an abortion. It's no big deal. I had one when I was 15. And so I thought, oh, well, she seems okay. And she said, it's no big deal. Those words just kept resonating with me, no big deal. But it kind of felt like a big deal, but I couldn't really pinpoint why. She helped me make the appointment. And as that day got closer and closer, I'll never forget that day. It was March 29th. As that day got closer and closer, I kept thinking, this feels like a big deal. But I started thinking about the Supreme Court, and I thought, well, they wouldn't make a law that was bad for me, right? There must be more to the story. And all the politicians and celebrities are telling me this was my right as a woman. And so I went on March 29th. I checked in to that clinic. They told me you'll be called back for your counseling in a moment. And I was so happy because it was a horrible place to be. This clinic. No little girl ever dreams of one day you like want to grow up and have an abortion. It's never on your radar. You never think that's where you're going to end up. And so there I was, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get counseling. This is great. An adult is going to tell me something different I can do. And so I went into this counseling. This woman was just dead on the inside. And I recognize now when you're condoning death every day, you tend to draw those spirits to you. But I walked in and I sat down, I burst into tears. She said, do you want to have this abortion? I said, I don't know any other choice, through my sobs. And she took a little card, wrote a number 2 on it, and said, well, here's your number, go sit down out there. And I realized at that point I was nothing but $250 to these people. And they didn't care about counseling me. And so I went to this waiting room, and it was filled with girls that looked just like me, you know, flipping through magazines, talking to each other. And by the time they started calling numbers, the whole room was filled to beyond capacity. There were girls in every chair, on every arm of every chair and couch. There were girls sitting on the floor. There were girls lined around the walls. And so they started calling numbers. They called number 1, and then they called number 2. And I had to get up and make my way through the maze of girls. I went into the next room, and I offered my first child to these strangers for $250 because I thought it was no big deal. When they got through, I couldn't walk, so they just kind of drugged me into the recovery room, and they dropped me down on a beanbag chair. That was the recovery room. It was filled with those chairs. And I laid there, and as they kept bringing in girl after girl and dropping her on the next beanbag chair, I was looking at these girls now, and every single one of them looked completely different from that first waiting room. Because now every single one of us was crying. I couldn't understand why I was crying, but I couldn't stop. No one was catching eye contact. No one was talking to each other. All of us were crying. Some were balled up in the fetal position. It was a horrible room to be in. I would not wish that room on my worst enemy. But I remember laying there and thinking, we just got rid of our worst problem, but why are none of us happy? And that question just haunted me for years. I got out of there as quickly as I could. Within the year, I was reliant upon drugs and alcohol just to get through the day, so I wouldn't have flashbacks and I wouldn't have nightmares. Within 2 years, I had attempted suicide. I finally admitted to my friend, like, this is really bothering me, the one who told me it was no big deal. In a drunken stupor one night, I admitted to her, like, this is really bothering me. I'm having a hard time sleeping. I attempted suicide, and she said, yeah, I did too. She didn't tell me that part. We weren't friends after that day. So I spent the next 7 years just trying to fix myself. My normal coping skills weren't working. My problem solving didn't work on this problem. And I realize now why. Abortion cuts so much deeper and is so much more cruel than other sinful choices that we make. And the reason why is because when God created us as women, as men, as mothers, as fathers, when He created us, He placed within us a nature to nurture and protect our children. That's why, as a parent, we would take a bullet for our kid and not even think about it. That's our nature. That's who He created us to be. So because that's our nature, when we choose abortion, we go against everything that we were created to be. And so because He created us in that way, we do not have the mental, the spiritual, or the emotional capacity to deal with the aftermath of this choice because we were never created to make this choice. He never placed within us a nature to choose death for our children. And so when we do that, we bring on these God-sized consequences that we are not equipped to bear. And so our normal coping skills do not work. So you start dealing with it on this human level, and you're trying to deal with it, a problem that is only fixable through a divine intervention. And so that's what happened to me. After 7 years, Jack and I had met. By then, we had 2 children right away. I took my whole family on this emotional roller coaster I was on. I became this helicopter parent, just trying to stay one step ahead of God so He wouldn't take my family away from me to make me pay for what I did. It was like I had such a distorted view of who God is and His beautiful grace. But finally, after 7 years, I heard a simple commercial on the radio that said, if you're suffering after an abortion, we have a class for you. And it was like this profound moment because I thought there are others, because I didn't know anybody else suffered after an abortion. And so I went to this class. The people running it introduced me to a Jesus who forgives the sin of abortion. And I haven't been able to be quiet about Him since then, because I refuse to allow my brothers and sisters to believe the same lie that I believed, that somehow this was going to fix our problem. I can tell you there is always an alternative. Then someone has to die to fix a problem. There's always an alternative. So I went through this class. I was forgiven. I was set free. It was an incredible, it just felt like this deliverance that I had had. I started teaching their abortion recovery class before I knew it. In 2000, we started Save One. We've been running for a couple of decades now, 24 years. I thought it was just going to be a ministry for my church, but as we started seeing people come to us, there was a common theme among their stories, and it was my story too, that as a child we had suffered sexual trauma, childhood sexual abuse. My grandfather sexually abused me as a child. So putting those together, just as many men as women came to us for sexual trauma, or they had that in their past. And so when I started putting these together, I started reading about it and realizing other people were putting those two together because they go hand in hand. And so at Save One, we feel like if we can get you healed from sexual trauma, we will have far less abortions in the world, because abortion tends to be the aftermath of sexual trauma. And so we wrote 3 Bible studies for men, for women, and for families, but then I wrote a 4th Bible study called Finding You, Recovering Your Identity After Sexual Trauma. And it's beautiful how God had us write these books. It's not anything magical we've written in these books. It is literally just God's word on a silver platter, focused on that wound like a laser beam. And his word is what heals us. It's not my words, it's not Jack's words, it's God's word. That's what heals us. And it's a beautiful process to see people be able to forgive their abuser, because you're not letting him or her off free, you're letting yourself off when you forgive. But seeing that forgiveness, seeing that realization, like I can walk free from this pain. And now, I know many of you are sitting here and some of you have chosen abortion, or maybe you paid for several abortions, or you begged her not to have the abortion, or maybe you're a grandparent who forced a child to have an abortion. That's a common story we hear. But you're thinking, I'm the only one in this room who has ever done anything like this. I can guarantee you are not. When you average out the statistics on just the abortions that were counted, it averages out to 1 out of every 3 women of childbearing age has had an abortion. That means 1 out of every 3 men have lost fatherhood. And we tend to think somehow, because we're not open, like totally open about these hard subjects. I heard you guys talk about them here, and I'm so grateful for that. But we're not totally open about it, so we tend to think like, they're not in here. Surely, all that's happening out there, we feel really sorry for them out there. But those statistics don't magically stop at the road. They are just as prevalent in the church as outside the church. And so what we do at Save One is we just want to see you whole, healthy, healed, so you can go and be the leader, the mother, the businessman, the businesswoman, whatever God has called you to be, that you will be able to do it at full strength. And what we see at Save One, and this is the part I love, it's Revelation 12:11 lived out, that says, we overcome him, talking about the enemy, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so you can't really go tell that testimony until you have had that reckoning with Jesus, that God moment where you say, you know what, you have to fill me, you have to heal me and set me free. And so when you have that moment in a local church, it's like you become this walking billboard for God's grace and mercy and forgiveness and healing, and it's beautiful. And let me tell you, it's not that you go through the Save One program and you end up, we're going to put you on the stage telling everybody. I tell people all the time, some of the greatest ministry we ever do is sitting at your dinner table and raising your kids to value life, talking to your neighbor, And before you know it, you may be telling your story in a confidential place and changing their minds, because we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And so that's why I know that abortion recovery is the key to making abortion unthinkable even before it becomes illegal in all 50 states. It's an incredible moment to see, and I want that for all of you. What I thought was just going to be a ministry I had at our church has now grown to over 400 chapters in 28 nations. It's an incredible thing to see. We didn't grow to that size because Jack and I are some kind of marketing gurus. We grew to that size because the need is so great. There are people hurting in our communities and in our churches. And so that's what we do in a nutshell. I mean, I know it's a heavy subject, but there is victory like you have never known if you have never laid this burden down. Victory and healing and forgiveness. And so listen, we want to meet you. We'd love to hear your story. We want to hug your neck. All our resources are available out there on the table. Come and get a t-shirt. Come and talk to us, because we would love to meet you and talk, okay? Thank you so much.
Good morning. You guys have a treasure in your pastors. I hope you know that. They are incredible. I'm going to be in Luke 15. If you want to turn there in your Bibles, I'm going to start out with a verse that's a little bit apart from that, but absolutely goes along with that. So I'm in Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I think we're going to have them on the big Bible up here. Yep, that's cool. It says, I call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. Now, arguably, this is the last time that Moses addressed all of the children of Israel. He did, and I recognize that he had some other moments where that there were other words that he spoken, but this is the last time that he spoke to the whole crew that he'd been traveling with for a little bit. And you guys know, as we all passed through that childhood phase where parents were sending us off to school, or we have kids that we have sent off to school. You want to say the important things right at the last minute before people leave, right? Like you guys remember when you were in like the 3rd or 4th grade and your mom or dad was asking, hey, did you brush your teeth and did you put on deodorant? Because stinky kids aren't cool at school, right? And then there's a little bit more serious question that comes from the parent side. It's like, did you get your lunch? Do you have your gym clothes? Because I'm not running back and forth to school all day, you know? And then they get even a little more serious as kids start driving. Hey, put your phone down. Put your seatbelt on. Look both ways before you pull out. We want to take care of people as they're leaving. And here's Moses, and he's not going to talk to them again. He knows that. And he said, I call heaven and earth as witnesses. He didn't just say, Aaron and Hur, come here. Need to talk to you guys, and I want them to be witnesses, what I'm saying. He called heaven and earth as witnesses. He called all of heaven and all of earth to be a witness to what he was saying here. God puts things in his word so that we look at them and we remember them and we live by them. And if we live by them, there is a good consequence to our decisions. And if we don't, there's tough consequences to our decisions. And then these decisions that we make, they're not just about our life. They're generational. It's what it says right there. Choose life that both you and your descendants, your children, your children's children, people are affected by the decisions that we make. And so God wanted us to have that, so he made sure that this was recorded for all of eternity. For us, for today. If he tarries for 1,000 years from now. If he doesn't tarry, it's still going on in heaven forever. Jesus recognized that decisions that we make, the choices that we make, have consequences. And so he taught about it over and over and over as he was doing ministry for 3.5 years here on earth. Luke 15 is one of those places where he talked about choices. And I'm going to kind of walk you through this part of the Bible. It's what we call a parable. A parable is a story with a point. And the story with a point is for us to get it, right? You know, like to learn something from it. And this is Luke 15. It starts in verse 11. It says, "Then he said," this is Jesus, "a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me.' So he divided to them his livelihood." The father did what the son asked. I call this the plea of the prodigal. We all have these plea moments, this plea where we want to do things the way we want to do them. And the problem with that is sometimes it doesn't go right in that same vein of wisdom. Sometimes it puts us in places that we don't need to be in. It puts us in spots and it brings consequences to things that we don't want to deal with the consequences of. It's about possessions, for sure. The kid wanted the possessions that was coming with it. But listen, he was like I was when I was 13. I want what I want, and I want it now. And I don't want to wait on it. I want it now, and I want to do it the way I want to do it. It's what happened with Sheila at 19. At 13, I was a big kid. I was 5'11". I had 8 chin hairs, and so I was kind of the rogue of the bunch, you know. I'm 5'10" now. They don't tell you about that cruel little thing that happens. You 30-year-olds, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. But my friends and I, we decided we were going to start our drinking career. We thought we would be cool. We see the other guys and how cool they are, then we're going to do this. So for weeks, I let those 8 chin hairs grow. And we devised a plan where we would camp out in a field, and in that field, we would walk across the street to a convenience store, and we would buy beer. Me being Mr. 5'11" with 8 chin hairs, I got nominated to make that move. And so I walked into the convenience store. I got 6 quarts of Country Club malt liquor. Don't judge me. I brought those 6 quarts up to the counter, and I pulled out all of my quarters that I had in my pocket. If you're a convenience store owner or clerk and somebody's paying with quarters for beer, just take a pause for a second. So I got my sacks of Country Club liquor. I went back to the field where we were camping out, and we drank over there. The guys that I hung out with, they didn't really have the same problem that I had. This is what happened with me. I unlocked a rage in a 13-year-old that I had no control over. I became that guy that was constantly asking, "Can you take me to get me some alcohol? Can you take me to get me beer? I have money. Will you go buy me beer? Will you just run me to the store and let me see if they'll sell it to me?" I did that as a 13-year-old. All of my teenage years, 13 through 19, I was obsessed with alcohol. It was a daily thing for a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, all the way through. It didn't stop in my 20s. In fact, it got much worse. In my 20s, though, something amazing happened, is that I met the most beautiful, the most incredible woman that I had ever laid eyes on. In fact, I'm going to shock y'all. We didn't go to Bible college, okay? I was sitting in a bar in downtown Chattanooga, and she came walking by. And I looked at my friend that I was sitting with, and I said, "I am going to marry that girl right there." And he looked at me, and he said, "You're an idiot. You don't even know her." And I said, "I'm going to find out." And so I pursued her and found out who she was. We went out on our first date, and here's what happened on the first date. I did what alcoholics do. I drank. In fact, I drank so much that by the end of the evening, our parting moment wasn't a cute little kiss. It was her finger in my face, and she said, "If you even think my name, don't say it out loud." That was the impression I had made as an alcoholic. And so I had to work very hard to get back to the second date. For men in the room, if you're single, I have a dating hack for you. If you're trying to go out with a single girl and she lives alone by herself around the 28th of the month, money can run out. And they're hungry. So they will go out with you even if they don't like you. You can follow me for more hacks. I've got them. It worked. So we went out again, but there was nothing really that happened that time. And then we started going out, and things got real serious. We got married in a hurry. And then about, I'm going to say, a few years into the marriage, Sheila found her healing from the abortion. And it wasn't any longer that we're partying together and the same people that we were that got married. She got her healing, and she decided that, well, Jack could be touched by Jesus the same way I was. So I became her project. If you've never been anybody's project, wow. We would have these incredible fights when we didn't get up and go to church together. She wouldn't go to church without me, so if I wouldn't go, then she'd just be steaming mad. And she would make my life miserable all week. And so this went on for years, and when we got to September of 1998, one morning she came in. I tell this, like, I don't know if you guys know about this, but she just started upping her game a little bit. And so she started taking these online courses. It's how to make your husband's life hell on earth if he doesn't go to church with you. She was a valedictorian of her class. And September of 98, she comes in and she says, hey, we going to church? And I had drank all day the day before. I drank till I passed out. It was a pretty normal Saturday for the way I lived at the time. And I said yes, because I didn't want to argue. The sole reason that I didn't just stay home that day was because I did not want to argue. I just wanted peace in the house. And so we got to church, and third row, aisle back, left-hand side of the building, facing the stage right where you're sitting, man. The Lord started speaking to me, and he said, Jack, give me everything or I'm going to take everything from you. The everything wasn't the possessions. It was my wife and kids. Because of the way I was acting and treating and the way I was living my life in light of the gift that he had given me. And I said, yes, Lord, I don't know how to do this, but I want to do this. And he said, I'll take you by the hand and lead you home. Take me by the hand. He took me from this place of prodigal living away from the Lord, and he showed me how to come out of that. And one of the things that he did that day that I didn't even realize for a couple of days is he delivered me from alcohol. 23 years I had been a daily drunk, and that day was the last day, well, the day before was the last day that I'd had anything to drink. September 6, 1998 is an incredible day in our lives because God changed everything. It started with a choice that had consequences. And then it began again new with a choice that have had consequences. And all of them have been good consequences since then. I'm not saying life's perfect since then. I mean, you go through things still like everybody else, but salvation was the most wonderful thing that ever happened with us. So choices matter. Verse 13, and not many days after the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country. There he wasted his possessions on prodigal living. Prodigal living is dissolute living. It's living without morals. It's living with bad morals. It's living in no respect of righteousness or holiness. That's what it is. And it's also like, I was this guy. I was celebrating publicly the drunkenness that I was stuck in. You celebrate publicly where you are with whatever the sin is. Sheila and I, we don't throw stones at anybody. I mean, we've been through the mess, and so everybody has their thing, you know. Everybody struggles with stuff, and whether that stuff is like a judgmental attitude or, you know, you just have some deep, dark secret that you have no idea how you ever get out of, God's the answer to all of it. He has the answer, and He is the answer. He's the answer to all of it. So this prodigal, he's out, he's gone, and he's blown all the money. He didn't put any of it in a 401k. There's no IRAs. There's nothing. He didn't listen to Dave Ramsey. He just went out and spent it all. But the proximity of the prodigal is not always where we think it is. Sheila had been trying to get me to go to church. I was in the church, but I was still prodigal living. There are people that are in the church that have prodigal consequences in their life, but they're still in the church. All the proximity of all the prodigals isn't out there. They're not all in Austin. They're not all in Dallas. They're not in Waxahachie. They're not in Houston. They're here. They're everywhere we go. Because we've made choices, and the choices sometimes weren't the best choices, and those choices have consequences. But when he had spent everything that he had, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to want. When you make bad choices, have you ever noticed that those bad choices just seem to multiply, or the consequences seem to multiply in the bad choices? Then he went and he joined himself to a citizen of that country. He went and found somebody that could help. And he sent him to the fields. This citizen sent the prodigal to the fields to feed the pigs. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, but nobody gave him anything. Can I tell you that there are, when you encounter people that have consequences of prodigal living, or they're living in prodigal actions and still ongoing, you have something to give them. You have a smile. You have an encouraging word. You have a friendship. You sometimes just have the ministry of being present. But you can do something for somebody that's struggling. And when we come to church, listen, what an incredible place. The Bible says, don't forsake the gathering of my people. And then there's a comma there. You know what that's after that comma? So you may encourage one another. We need to be encouragers, not to let somebody sit and not say anything, even though we know that they look like they're struggling. We can do this. Bad choices, bad choices, bad choices. They have consequences. But when he came to himself, this is the revelation moment. He was okay, he got gone, and now he's back. When he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? Here I am over here struggling. So I'll arise and I'll go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Any of y'all ever have those fake conversations before you go have the real conversation? Because that's what he's doing here. You know, he's like, yeah, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this. Sheila and I have them. Well, if she says this, you ought to say that back, you know. Fake conversations are okay, but real conversations have to happen. The real conversation has to happen. And this is where the pardon of the prodigal comes. And he arose and he came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him. And what did he have? He had compassion. This is what we need to do for every one of the people that we encounter. God wants us to be compassionate people. And he ran and he fell on his neck. That means that he gave him a hug that just wouldn't let go. He wouldn't let go. It's the hug that gets so long that it never really gets awkward. Y'all get those hugs that are awkward sometimes, you know, and you're like, boy, if they just let go right now. You start trying to get an elbow in there. This one never gets awkward because it's so full of love and the reuniting of two people that never should have been apart. And then the son, he goes into his fake conversation in a real way. Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. We really negotiate poorly when we're in trouble. He's wanting to be just like a hired servant, and here he is, a child of the king. He's wanting to be a hired servant, and here he is. The man that's in charge of everything has ran out to him and hugged him and kissed him. And the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe. Put the good robe on him. He looks rough. And put a ring on his hand. Say that he is a part of this family. And put sandals on his feet because he ain't had a pedicure in a long time. Them looking rough. And then bring the fatted calf here. It's veal time, guys. And let us eat and be merry, for this is my son who was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. With the keyboards, please. Listen, guys. He's waiting for us. He's always waiting for us. The people that we've had trouble with in the past, they're ready. We can reconcile. Family members, it doesn't matter what it is. Forgiveness is for you, it's not for them. The way we run away with the choices that we make, and we think that we're the only one or that we can't get back from this. You can. And today is the day. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads. This is what I'm going to tell you on the front end. I'm not going to ask